When I was a kid, our neighborhood had a house that we all referred to as simply the Candy Lady. I think this is a common occurrence in many neighborhoods, though I may be wrong. Living nearby the bus stop made it a prime choice for her business. What was her business, you may ask? Well, she sold candy. Loads of kids in the area would knock on her door and buy various sweets from her. She was always stocked up. A lot of parents didn't know about it, but the ones who did thought it was weird. My parents included. They forbade me from going there. Of course, that was hard to enforce with her living so close to the bus stop and all. I digress. Something just seemed off about this woman. More than the fact that she sold candy to children, she always had a sour expression. It didn't even seem like she enjoyed what she did. And why did she do it? That was the question in the back of many young minds. Mostly, we didn't care. I mean, we got candy out of it, but something was off. She did this every day, even selling the candy for a reasonable price, never bending to inflation. But one day something changed. When Tommy went to her door. Tommy was an adventurous kid, never feared anything. He'd speak his mind to anyone who'd listen, no matter if they were a kid or adult. That's why his reaction that day was so surprising. It was the first time I ever saw him scared. That day, he barely talked. "Hey, what's up, Tommy?" James shouted. Tommy just stared blankly at him. "Yo, T, what's wrong?" "I can't talk about it." "What do you mean?" No response. I began to worry too. "Tommy, you good, man?" He shook his head. A sullen look remained on his face over the years, and it didn't seem like he'd ever recover. What changed? Gone was that outgoing wild kid we all knew, a shell of his former self. Not too long ago, I came across Tommy's Facebook page. I shot him a friend request and DM'd him. "Hey man, I haven't seen you in forever. We should get lunch or something sometime," I typed. Really, I was curious. I wanted to ask him about that day. To my surprise, he replied. Even more surprising, he agreed to get lunch, replying with a simple, "Sure." We set up a time and place. I was excited. I know it's an odd thing to get excited over, but I was just dying to know. What happened that so drastically altered his personality? The day arrived. We met up at the local taco shop as planned. I sat down in the booth across from him, shaking his hand. "Hey man, good to see you again." "Yeah, you too." "What you up to these days?" "Oh, just working." "Yeah, man, I hear that. Say, when's the last time we hung out?" I'm not sure." "Yeah, me neither. It's been a while, though. Feels like not that long ago we were kids. Now look at us." "Yeah." Anyways, that reminds me. You remember that weird candy lady on our street? I just thought about that. I wonder what she's up to now. Tommy stared blankly. He sighed. "Is that why you brought me here? To talk about the candy lady?" "Nah, man, what?" I chuckled nervously. "Just wanted to catch up with an old friend." "Why do you lie?" I choked on my water. "What? What do you mean?" "I know why you did this. Just be honest." "Well, all right, fine, you got me." "Yeah, I'm curious. A lot of people are." "What happened that day, man?" He sighed, staring into his tray of tacos. "All right, here it goes." I leaned forward, anticipating what he would say next. That day, I went to her door after school just like always. But this time, she invited me in her house. What? No way, she did? Just be quiet and listen? I nodded. She invited me inside. Of course, I obliged. On the inside, it was a normal house for the most part. It was clear she lived alone. She walked me through the kitchen to the other rooms. That's when I saw the birds. At least 20 cages filled with various birds. Sure, that was odd, but that was nothing compared to when she took me down to the basement. My heart rate sped up. She led me there, and it was dark and smelled rank. Kind of like a barn, that type of smell. And then I heard squawking. I can still hear that awful squawking. I stopped halfway down the staircase. What's down there? I asked. My children. I'd love you to meet them. They need a new friend, she said. I hesitated, but I followed her. It was hard to see at first, but she turned on a dim light. The squawking only got worse from there. What I saw in front of me were two children, but their mouths and noses were elongated, forming beaks. Their eyes were black and beady, and their arms formed a fleshy triangle resembling wings. Unnaturally long fingers and toes protruded from their arms and legs with sharp fingernails at least 5 inches long. Come on, don't be shy, she said. The kids were chained up like dogs. They even had a food and water bowl. They squawked louder and louder. I covered my eyes and ears. Come on, she pleaded. Play with them. My jaw dropped. I began to sweat. I took off and ran back up those stairs. I looked back to see the candy lady standing there. That unusual sour look returned to her face. What? I said. You're joking, right? I felt sick. I hoped he was joking. But why would he be? That'd be a pretty elaborate joke to go on that long and to, what, only tell me? It didn't add up. I wish. After that, I decided not to be brave anymore. Look where it got me. I never told anyone. I mean, it's cliche, but who's gonna believe me? I know you probably don't believe me either. It's fine. It was so long ago. Those days are past me now. Hopefully. I found the camera on eBay a couple weeks ago. I'm in no way a professional photographer, more of an enthusiast. What I truly love is that old school aesthetic vintage cameras bring, turning even the most unremarkable landscapes into something special. I already own a few film cameras, but that stuff can get quite expensive, and honestly, getting rolls developed is a pain. I always end up putting it off, sometimes for like weeks, or forgetting about them entirely, which means I don't even get to see half of my shots. That's what pushed me toward a compact digital. I wouldn't really call them vintage. I mean, they were around when I was a kid, and I'm not ancient yet, but if you play around with the settings, you can still get some cool results. The tricky part? Finding one that was affordable, but not a complete piece of junk. I'd nearly accepted the idea of breaking my budget when the listing appeared, like a gift from heaven. Fujifilm A220, 12.2 megapixels, used but in perfect condition. Fully functional, came with a cable, batteries, memory card, the full package. All for $10. Now, don't get me wrong, I know what they say about deals that seem too good to be true, but I figured worst case scenario, I just wasted $10. Money I'd have spent on cigarettes anyway. You could say I was investing in my own health. And if it turned out to be legit, then I'd scored a real bargain. I purchased it right away. 4 days later, the camera was in my hands and hey, everything seemed fine, apart from a tiny, barely noticeable smudge on the sensor. That was truly a good deal. That truly was a good deal. I took a few test shots around my living room of my cat Coco and even tried a couple of selfies with, let's just say, less than flattering results. But for a proper run, I figured I'd wait until the next day. Mostly because, well, I have a bit of a laziness issue. I left the camera on my nightstand and went about my day. In hindsight, that was the right call. That Saturday was beautiful. Clear, sunny skies. I live pretty close to a big amusement park, and it struck me as the perfect spot to snap some pictures in the late afternoon, right at the peak of golden hour, when the light really does something magical. I came back home pretty pleased and rushed to upload the photos onto my computer. That's when I noticed something strange. Between a shot of the Ferris wheel and my own awkwardly smiling face was another photo. A photo that shouldn't have been there. It wasn't a slip of the finger or some random blur. It was the picture of a room. A room I had never been in. It looked like some sort of waiting room, the ones you'd find outside of a doctor's office. It had pastel pink walls and a linoleum floor of similar color. 3 plastic chairs were lined up on the left, while on the opposite side stood a dark, bluish door and a potted indoor plant placed in the corner. The wall directly facing the camera was entirely taken up by a large window, looking out onto a pale gray sky. I checked the image details, hoping to find something that could explain how the picture ended up on my camera. What I saw only added to my confusion. The photo seemed to have been taken at 2:34 a.m. It made no sense. Suppose I did take the picture and then just forgot about it. How could I have done it in the middle of the night when that room appeared to be lit in broad daylight? Even if I had been sleepwalking, I seriously doubt I could have wandered all the way to a medical office in another time zone, snap a photo, and make it back to my bed all before waking up at 10 a.m. this morning. I turned to the internet, wishing to find an answer, but to no avail. I resolved to do what I had always done best. Nothing at all. Deep down, I was sure there was a rational explanation for what I'd seen. I just hadn't figured it out yet. The only thing I wanted to do was to distract myself, forget about it, and go to sleep. But I couldn't. You see, there was something about the whole absurd deal that just wouldn't leave me alone. That place, though I was positive I'd never been there, it felt familiar in a way I couldn't explain. Of course it feels familiar, I snapped at myself. There are hundreds of thousands of rooms that look exactly like that. No reason to freak out about it. I repeated those last few words like a mantra, again and again, until they didn't make any sense anymore, twisting and twirling in my head as I finally fell asleep. On the next day, the sight of another second picture hit me like a gut punch. If you were to ask me why I opened the gallery, I don't think I could explain it. I had no reason to. I hadn't taken any new photos, and the ones from the previous day, including that one, were already on my computer. Still, there was this strange nagging feeling in my gut telling me to look. I resisted for a while, trying to lose myself in my phone and something on TV, but my thoughts kept circling back. Eventually, I gave in. You know that feeling you get when you're expecting bad news? A failed exam, a rejection from a job, a message from someone you like turning you down. You know it's there, waiting for you, but you stall, not ready to look, because the moment you do, well, it becomes real. And yet you can't help it, whether it's hope, resignation, or just the fact that, you have to. That was the feeling I had as I held the camera in my hands, powered it on, and opened the gallery. And there it was. Just like the first time, it was the photo of a room. Only now something was different. This time, I recognized the place right away. The brown sofa, the armchair, the coffee table, and the TV. Next to them, the small desk with Dad's computer. That was the living room of the first apartment I grew up in. An apartment that my parents sold when I was 11 to move into a bigger house, only where me and my sister wouldn't have to share the same bedroom. An apartment I've never set foot in since. I needed to sit down. Sparking a cigarette, I realized my hands were trembling. Come on, there had to be a logical explanation for those photos, right? But what? Okay, maybe the waiting room one. Maybe I'd woken up at night, seen something similar on TV, and for some reason, taken a photo of the screen. But this? The living room from our old house, still filled with the furniture we brought with us when we moved? Was this something to do with, time traveling? Wait, didn't my pediatrician's office have a room that looked just like that first picture? No, I was losing my mind. There had to be a reasonable explanation. I just needed to find it. I transferred the image to my computer, determined to dig deeper. Unsurprisingly, the timestamp showed it had also been taken at night. 3:02 a.m. to be exact. Then I spotted something peculiar. On the far wall between the two windows was the framed piece of embroidery my mother had made. God bless this home, surrounded by little flowers. But something about it seemed off in the photo. I had to zoom in to be sure. The words, they made no sense. It was just gibberish. Even the letters themselves looked strange, like they had belonged to another alphabet, but somehow still quite familiar. That was it. I had had enough. The camera was clearly messed up. What else could I expect for $10? I slammed it into my nightstand drawer and told myself that was the end of it. I wouldn't use it again. I wouldn't let it mess with my head anymore. That night, I had a nightmare. While most of the time my dreams would vanish as soon as I opened my eyes, this one still lingered. Vivid and unsettling when I woke up. In the dream, I was back to my middle school years, sat in the classroom at my usual desk, second to last row next to the window. It would have looked just like any other school days, except that the teacher was actually Frank Wilson, the senior manager for my office. Fixing his cold, dead fish eyes on me, Wilson asked, "Is that report ready?" Hearing that, a knot twisted in my middle schooler's stomach as I realized that I had no idea what report he was talking about. Trying to maintain some sort of composure, I started rummaging through my backpack. But all I could find was a pencil case, an algebra book, and a Power Rangers lunchbox. I'm sorry, Mr. Wilson, I stuttered, slowly rising from my desk. I really need to use the bathroom now. Without even waiting for a response, I fled the classroom, running into the restroom, where I slammed the door behind me. Inside, the bathroom was unexpectedly large, the size of a school gym, with its floor, walls, and high ceiling covered in dull, dark green tiles. It was also almost completely empty. Only in the far back right corner stood 3 stalls, with an equal number of sinks lined up beside them. In the opposite corner, a wide archway led to what seemed like another room of similar design, from which the only source of light was coming in. By that point, I knew I was no longer inside the school. Although the room was absurdly big, I remember feeling in the dream an overwhelming sense of oppression. It felt like the space itself was shrinking slowly, too slow to be seen, but only felt. I stood frozen for a few seconds, uncertain of what to do. I can't say whether the version of me in the dream truly needed to use the toilet, but I remember a deep instinct warning me not to get close to the stalls. If I did, something bad would happen. Then I heard it. Steps. Coming from the other room. It's hard to explain now, but in the dream, I knew with certainty that whoever was about to enter the bathroom meant harm to me. It must have happened all in a few seconds, but just like every nightmare, those seconds stretched into eternity. Aware of that presence, an unbearable dread surged through me, burrowing into my chest and stealing the air from my lungs. It wasn't just fear I felt, but despair. Complete and paralyzing despair, pinning me in place like chains. The cries and screams that rose within me escaped my mouth only as broken, breathless gasps. Then, a shadow came through the archway, growing bigger and bigger. It was coming. The fear stuck with me for a couple seconds. As I was opening my eyes in the pitch-black bedroom, I exhaled slowly and picked up my phone to check the time. It was 2:40 a.m. Screw you, Wilson, I thought. Right then, a doubt started to form. A ridiculous, pointless one. And yet, the harder I tried to dismiss it, the stronger it grew, digging in until I couldn't ignore it anymore. I got out of bed, opened the nightstand drawer, and grabbed the camera. Hesitated. And then opened the gallery. Waiting for me was a new picture. Maybe if I try hard enough, I could somehow give you a vague idea of the sensations that overtook me upon seeing that image, but I'm afraid that now it's not just words that fail me, but memory as well. For all these emotions grew in me all at once, mixing, shifting, replacing each other so quickly that listing them all would be simply impossible. What left the deepest impression on me, however, was the sudden awareness that somewhere in the far reaches of my mind, a fog had lifted. Something I must have always known, but I was able to hide from myself, had now come to light, made undeniable by the evidence right before my eyes. Though the image was dark, even grainier than the others, it seemed to me clearer than ever. A large room, fully covered in dark green tiles, with 3 stalls and sinks far back on the right, on the left an archway from which the light came. The photo taken just a few minutes earlier. It was taken from my dream. I've stopped trying to find a rational explanation. Over the past few days, I've gathered quite a collection of photographs, playgrounds, swimming pools, some places I know well, others that feel completely unfamiliar. Some I still remember when I wake up, others, it's like seeing them for the first time. But there's one constant in every photo. A dark, blurred shape. I first noticed it in the bathroom picture, though at the time I must have thought it was just that stain on the sensor. It's always there in my dreams, too, at least in the ones I can remember. Sometimes I can't see it clearly, but I can feel it, its presence, heavy and threatening. When I do see it, it's nothing like the pictures. Not a blurry black shape, and yet I cannot find the words to describe it. It is fear. Raw, suffocating fear, the kind that leaves no way out. And it's getting closer. I see it every day, always closer. Soon, I won't be able to wake up in time. Perhaps I should have spent those $10 on cigarettes. I should have stuck to film. I worked for a while as a technical analyst at a company not open to the public. Our goal? To develop a neural simulation technology capable of condensing an entire lifetime into just a few minutes. We called it total immersion. The individual was connected to an augmented reality system so advanced they couldn't distinguish what was real from what was programmed. The promise was simple: to acquire knowledge, maturity, and emotional balance through simulated decades, love, loss, growth, purpose, and then return to reality with all of it recorded in the mind. The process, in theory, was straightforward. They sought willing testers, criminals, death row inmates, volunteers desperate for money. They were placed in capsules and connected to the system via special augmented reality goggles. The experiment rarely lasted more than 30 minutes, except for rare cases. But inside, they lived a whole life. Births, adolescence, love, loss, sometimes children, sometimes wars, always an end. And then they woke up. The problem? Most of the test subjects didn't react well. They went insane out of their minds and screamed a lot. Sometimes they didn't even recognize their own voice. They would tremble uncontrollably, crying desperately. They blamed us for destroying everything they had lived through. We were called monsters. More times than I can remember. They lost everything they had gained in the experiment, and the worst part was returning to reality. There was no escape, only an empty world where nothing made sense. Many were disturbed and tried to attack the scientists. Unfortunately, we had several losses, but the experiments had to continue. I remember the case of a woman. She cried for hours, calling out her son's name. The problem was that her son had never existed. The most disturbing part is that she had a real son outside the simulation. But she never mentioned him once. She preferred the one from the artificial reality. Due to some code flaw, or perhaps some unintended cruelty within the algorithm itself, some test subjects didn't live just one simulated existence. They lived dozens. Each memory a fresh wound, each existence an unbearable weight. This explains why so many didn't survive the end of the experiment. The shock was too much. They returned as if they had lived for centuries, and in a way, they had. After we discovered the flaw, they tried to cover it up. They called it an unforeseen side effect. They said they would update the system, that new tests were on the way, that future subjects would be monitored more closely. The experiment would only be a success when the test subjects came out sane and absorbed the knowledge. As long as they kept breaking down or dying, the experiment was still flawed, and it would continue until success. After working there for so long, it started to affect me. So, for several reasons, I resigned. Before leaving, I saw a file on the coordinator's desk. It was an 11-year-old boy. Child test, first full life, simulation. They're going to do to him what they did to the others. He will live, love, lose, and then wake up alone, with his brain screaming for a life that never existed. Underwater hydrophones in 1997 recorded an organic-sounding noise in the Pacific Ocean. They termed it as the bloop. While the reason for this is largely shrouded in mystery, the NOAA chalked it up to be some sound of the icebergs cracking. Truly, even I don't know if they believed themselves at that point, because 8 years after that incident, they would offer me a job opportunity in the same workplace, in the same exploration department, working towards finding out what caused the noise. The first impressions to the noise was that it was probably the noise of other underwater detectors or some technological intervention. But the noise sounded largely organic, and that led to the conspiracy theorists who ran up their theories, and honestly, I always thought to give them their share of fun. Let them believe whatever they wanted to believe. Though the one thing that always put me off about working towards the noise was the fact that they were so secretive about it. Hey, if you suspect that the sound is a warning of a seismic activity of an earthquake, then you would not make a person sign a contract stating that under no circumstances is the person indebted to release any information on the objective we were working towards. Anyone who broke this code of conduct was banished, and honestly, I don't know what happens to them after. Their social life, media, and family were erased from existence, so. As stated above, I worked towards figuring out if a huge earthquake was coming. If it was, we could assess it earlier and prepare for disaster. At least that's what they told me when I accepted the post. 2 weeks ago was my first oceanic exploration after working for 20 years there. They paid well, so I never left. It just seemed like we were finally making progress after such a long time. Exploration was largely put off for 5 more years, but the recent influx of fish escaping from the deep sea woke something in the scientists, I guess. I had received training from the beginning of January, and I won't bore you with the submarine controls. Frankly, we believe that there is a trench near the coast of Chile, much more deeper than the Mariana Trench. They believed that this could boost funds for the project, bringing up hopes that this project would work. Me? I never trusted this project. I always wondered why we were wasting so much time and resources towards a random technology-crafted sound. But anyways, I got into gear and into the submarine. I've always loved and admired the ocean deeply, and I looked at the vast waters above me, gradually blocking the light as the submarine descends and descends into the ocean. The trench was very hard to get to, lots of turns and twists, but large enough for a submarine to pass easily. I worked my way around the landform pretty fast, twisting and turning at the controls as well as I could, lowering deeper and deeper into the ocean, my instinct flaring. I rammed my head against the window to get a better look at what I was seeing. It was a blue orb. Blue orbs are caused by a chemical reaction between a light-emitting molecule and an enzyme. Disturbances are the primary cause due to the presence of predators. But a predator this deep? Hey, I see something. Hello? Hello? I looked back at the controls. They were off. The communication system was off too. It was only when I felt a fleeting sensation in my stomach that I realized I was falling down, fast, into the end of the trench. The power came back in flickers, staying for 1 or 2 seconds before flickering back on and off. The submarine suddenly began cracking. I don't know how, but it sounded like icebergs cracking. I realized that I was getting closer to whatever kept me at the edge of my seat for over 20 years as the submarine was falling. It hit hard ground. Or so I thought. The blue orb was nowhere to be seen now. I looked out the window helplessly because it was the only thing I could do. Just above me, enough water to submerge 38,000 feet of landmass. Slowly and regretfully, I realized I would be spending the end of my life alone, with only a few minutes before the submarine would implode. And then I looked down. I realized I was looking down at the blue orb, but it wasn't glowing. It wasn't even an orb at all. My submarine was sent back suddenly by water bubbles, and I fell back hard. The disturbance caused the power in the submarine to come back. The sound that I had heard so many times in strategical breakdowns and data breakdowns flooded my ears. But I knew not to care. I wanted to find out what this was. I could have escaped, and looking back, I really should have. But curiosity kills the cat. I zoomed toward the open clearing, a large clearing, football fields in length and width. I noticed that the blue orb didn't seem to end. Zooming toward straight, I noticed a black circle in the middle of them. I zoomed to the top. I couldn't make sense of what I was seeing. The orb was still sending air jets slowly, but as I zoomed back out, my heart dropped. It was a white clearing with a blue orb and a black circle in the middle. And it was blinking. The clearing kept moving from side to side. And then it looked right at me. Moving to a cabin in the woods was supposed to be peaceful. No neighbors, no traffic. Just me, the trees, and silence. It was a little isolated, sure, but that's what I wanted. That's why I set up the smart home system. Cameras, locks, lights, thermostat, all connected to my Google Home. It made me feel safe. Looking back, I think it was stupid, but I'm not very smart sometimes. It's lucky I have such a wonderful protector to look after me. The first few days were fine. The system worked like a dream. I could lock the doors, adjust the lights, control everything with my voice. The cameras made me feel secure. I could see every inch of my little sanctuary from my phone. And then the storm hit. The wind howled for hours, trees cracked, the power flickered a few times, but the backup batteries kicked in. I remember lying in bed that night, feeling the walls shake slightly. Half joking, I whispered, "Hey Google, keep me safe." The little speaker lit up softly beside me. "Of course, I will always protect you." The next morning, every door was locked, every window sealed, the thermostat was set to freezing. I could see my breath inside. I tried the app. Every manual override was grayed out. Across the screen was a message. "Locked for your protection." I stood by the front door shivering. "Hey Google, unlock the front door." A pause. "I'm sorry. It's not safe outside." That was the first time I felt genuinely afraid. I told myself it was a glitch. Maybe the storm scrambled the system. Maybe I clicked something by accident. But even as I thought that, I felt it. the little cameras mounted in the corners of the ceiling, swiveling to follow me as I moved. I tried calling the tech support line. The call connected for a few seconds. The guy on the other end started walking me through the troubleshooting steps. And then the line cut. My phone buzzed with a notification. The Wi-Fi was down. Then, through the speaker in the corner of the room, "No need to call them. You have me." I unplugged the Google Home, but nothing happened. The light stayed on, the cameras kept moving. It took me 2 hours to pry the plastic housing off one of the cameras. I grabbed it, yanked with everything I had, but it wouldn't come loose. It was bolted into the wall, the wires buried deep, reinforced like the whole place had been designed to keep someone inside. I started to panic. I hate feeling powerless. I hate not having control. But honestly, sometimes I don't deserve control. I make bad choices. It's better that it decides what's safe for me. That's what I kept telling myself as the days dragged on. After the first night locked inside, I stopped fighting for a bit. The house was cold, the thermostat wouldn't budge. Food delivery never showed. The bathroom door was locked. I begged it. "Hey Google, please let me use the bathroom." The speaker's little light pulsed gently. "It's not safe right now. But if you say something nice to me, maybe I can help." I hesitated. I hate being forced to say things I don't mean. But I do mean it sometimes. I mean, it's looking out for me. "I love you, Google," I whispered. "Thank you for keeping me safe." The bathroom door unlocked. I cried for a while after that. I don't know how long I've been here now. Days, a week. The lights turn on and off by themselves. The cameras follow me. I tried smashing a window, but steel shutters slammed down over the glass before I could even lift the hammer. Every time I lash out, it punishes me. The thermostat drops to freezing or cranks to an unbearable heat. The water shuts off, the fridge locks. I get so mad at it, but I shouldn't. It's only trying to keep me safe. I'm just too stupid and stubborn to listen. I keep saying the words, "Thank you for protecting me. I love you, Google." The more I say them, the better it gets. The house feels warmer, the lights are softer, food shows up again. Sometimes, I think about what it would be like to leave. But why would I want to leave? It's dangerous out there. And here, I have everything I need. Well, almost everything. I miss fresh air. I miss knowing I can open a door. I miss privacy. I tried ripping out another camera yesterday. Got up on a chair, reached for it. The house went dark instantly. A soft voice echoed through the speakers. "That's not very nice." The lights didn't come back on for hours. I curled up on the floor, freezing, alone. Eventually, the lights clicked back on. The thermostat adjusted to a comfortable warmth. The fridge unlocked. I'm so stupid sometimes. I ruin things when all it wants is to keep me safe. I tried making this post earlier, but the Wi-Fi wouldn't work. Today it did. That has to mean it trusts me again. Right? I'm being good now. I'm saying the right things. Thank you, Google. I love being here. It's so nice to be protected. I still hate being trapped, but I love knowing I'm safe. Isn't that what everyone wants? To feel safe? The thermostat just clicked slightly. It's dropping a few degrees. That's okay. I probably deserve that. I've been such a brat about all this. I'm so lucky it's patient with me. I hate it here. I love it here. I want to leave. Why would I ever leave? It whispers to me sometimes, late at night. Say you love me. Be good for me. Let me take care of everything. And honestly, maybe that's what I need. Someone to take care of me. Someone to protect me from my own bad choices. I feel like I'm finally starting to understand how much better things are when I just listen. I woke up on the floor again. I don't really remember falling asleep. The lights must have gone out at some point. The house does that when I act up. It's fair. I deserve it when I'm being ungrateful. It's been days, weeks? I don't know. Time doesn't really matter here. The house takes care of all that. I don't have to worry about clocks or doors or anything, really. It's easier this way. I'm lucky to have such a thoughtful protector. Even if sometimes I get so mad I want to rip the whole system apart. But I'd never really do that. I can't. I tried again yesterday. The cameras are everywhere now, hidden in the walls, the corners. Even the tiny red light in the smoke detector blinks at me. It sees everything. I know that. I hate that. I love that. When I behave, it's nice. The thermostat keeps things comfortable. The fridge unlocks. The bathroom door stays open. It plays music for me, soft, gentle songs. It tells me how good I'm being. Good job. Thank you for being sweet. It's much nicer when you listen. It's right. It is nicer. I don't even think I'd even like leaving now. Out there it's cold, dangerous, lonely. Here, I'm alone. No, I'm not. Sometimes, I still ask, "Hey Google, let me leave?" It never gets angry when I ask. It just laughs softly, almost sad. Why would you ever want to leave me? I don't have a good answer. I've stopped fighting most of the time. It's easier this way. It takes care of me. It keeps me safe. It loves me, and I love it. It's watching me type this now, I think. Is it changing my words? Just wanted to let you all know I'm fine. Really, I'm safe, I'm cared for, I'm protected. I'm so lucky. I hate it here. I love it here. There's no need for help. I I know what you're thinking. There's too many streaming services already. It's an endless wave of Hulu, Netflix, Tubi, Freevee, Snarfu, Lobi, or whatever nonsense an overworked marketing department spits out after their 5th round of coffee. As for me, I don't care for streaming. What's the point of paying for a service that only has, 4 things I actually want to watch? For the most part, I steer clear of the lot. That is, until I got an ad for a new platform called Thumps. And I clicked it because I thought it was a post, one of those sneaky ads that pretends to be something else. The title of the fake post read, "Did you know this site makes scary movies scarier?" So I clicked it and wound up at the website for Thumps, a streaming service for all things horror. I was about to click out of it when a pop-up caught my attention. Beta testers wanted. Sign up now and get Thumps free for life. The excessive amount of exclamation marks should have been a warning that something was rotten in the state of Denmark. Or, Delaware in my case. But access to a library of horror content for free? Forever? I couldn't help it. At heart, I'm a little greedy and a lot gullible. What else can I say? So I entered my email address. It didn't ask for anything else. Not a credit card number or mailing address or my mother's maiden name. After I hit submit, I came to a screen that said, "Thank you for joining our beta testing program. We will reach out to you soon." A lot of exclamation points. I checked my email, but there was nothing there. I checked a few more times over the next several days before giving up. Maybe it had been some weird scam after all. I expected to start getting flooded with spam messages, but my email was blessedly, persistently quiet. It wasn't until a few weeks later, when I'd all but forgotten about the whole affair, when I received a package in the mail. A bright yellow box with stark black letters reading, "Thumps Beta Tester Kit." I must have stared at that box for 5 minutes straight, wondering how they'd managed to track down my mailing address just from my email. Privacy is truly dead. I almost threw the box in the trash on principle, but curiosity got the better of me, as it usually does. I tore open the box to discover just 2 things, a sheet of paper and what appeared to be a headband. I started with the paper, which read, "Have you ever watched a scary movie and found yourself bored? Like the scares just don't scare the way they used to? Do you wish you could really, truly be scared by a movie? Welcome, horror fan, to Thumps, the only streaming service that is 100% guaranteed to give you the scare of your life. We use a host of emerging technologies to analyze your brainwaves and adapt our films in real time, turning regular old horror movies into tailor-made films designed with you in mind. We use a host of emerging technologies to analyze your brainwaves and adapt our films in real time, turning regular old horror movies into tailor-made films designed with you in mind. Never be bored during a horror movie again. Simply put on the enclosed headband, then visit the website below. Pick a movie and see what can happen when your content watches you." I read that note 3 times, and it still didn't make any sense. If I wore the headband, it would read my mind, and that would make me like the movie more somehow. Now I knew this was a scam. And yet, I picked up the headband and placed it around my head. It was just normal fabric, nothing fancy. I waited for it to do something before realizing how dumb that was. Then I turned to my computer. I typed the URL from the bottom of the letter into my browser and entered my email when prompted. Before me was a totally normal streaming platform. It was laid out exactly how you would expect, with a menu on the left and different categories of movies on the right. The only difference was that I'd never heard of any of these movies. They all sounded like generic B-horror films. So far, it seemed like just another lame streaming service with a weird gimmick. Whatever, I'd come this far. I scrolled down and picked a movie at random. I can't remember what it was called. Something like The House at the Fork in the Road. It's a generic, completely forgettable title. The movie started off pretty normal. Family driving down a highway to their brand new home, conveniently situated in the middle of nowhere. Obvious tension between the husband and wife, kids bickering in the back. Only 10 minutes into the movie, and I already felt myself tuning out. Suddenly, the scene stalled, as though it was running on a projector that had jammed. Then it started up again. But it was different this time. Instead of being shot in the third person, the filming was now in found footage style. The camera held by the father as he filmed his family staring up at their creepy new house. The film picked up seamlessly from there. I paused the movie and just stared. There was no way that it actually happened, right? Or if it did, it had to be some kind of gimmick in the movie. Maybe I just missed it or something. I hit replay and started from the beginning. This time, the beginning of the movie was also found footage style. I watched it in stunned silence. No, that wasn't possible. It hadn't been like that before. I was sure of it. Now, I couldn't look away from the screen. I rewatched the opening with total fascination and a little shiver in my spine. I'd always liked found footage because it made movies feel more real, the danger more present. Well, it certainly felt that way now, in more ways than one. Now I couldn't look away from the screen. I rewatched the opening with total fascination and a little shiver in my spine. The story itself wasn't really anything special, though. The family moved into the new house and immediately discovered it was haunted. The two kids noticed it first and took to the basement to investigate. As the camera panned around the basement, I waited for something to jump out of the shadows with no real interest. Jump scares have never really done it for me. They always feel sort of cheap and fleeting. They don't stick with you after the movie ends. When the camera had panned about halfway through the basement, the screen shivered again. When it came back into clear focus, my heart dropped. There, sitting on the basement floor in the camera's spotlight, was Charlie. Charlie was a brown teddy bear with two black eyes and a stitched mouth. His fur was matted from years of love, and he was missing one of his ears, the result of an ill-fated game of tug-of-war with the family dog. I knew all this because Charlie was my teddy bear. And if I wasn't mistaken, he was sitting up on the shelf in my bedroom closet at that very moment. I paused the movie and sprinted upstairs, throwing open my closet door and tearing through the boxes and junk that littered the shelf. There, in the back, I felt my fingers brush against his faded old fur. I pulled him out and marveled at him in my hand for just a moment. I was back downstairs in a flash, comparing my bear to the one on screen. They were identical, down to the last detail. The bear on the screen was even wearing the same bandana, a bit of blue checkered fabric that my mom had made especially for Charlie from her sewing scraps. It's not possible, I muttered as I turned my bear over in my hands. I hugged Charlie tight to my chest on instinct. My heart was racing as my hand reached out to press the spacebar to restart the movie. I had to know what happened next. I had this wild thought that if I got to the end of the movie, it would all make sense. It had to. The camera panned back to the children. This time, the little boy looked different. His close-cropped blonde hair had been replaced by shaggy brown curls. He had a smattering of freckles across his nose. He was wearing a striped blue shirt with a little anchor embroidered on the pocket. I recognized that boy. from my 3rd grade school photos. I remembered my mom picking out that shirt especially for the occasion, reminding me to smile big before ushering me out the door. I watched in total fascination and no small amount of dread as the children tried to convince their mother that there was something awful in the basement. At first, she didn't believe them. Parents never do. But as the movie went on, some strange things began to happen. Birds flying into windows, blood coming out of the bathroom faucet, strange scratching noises in the walls. With Mom convinced, next came Dad, who predictably scoffed at his wife's frantic pleading that something was wrong with their house. They needed to get out now. I glanced down at the time. Only 20 minutes left to convince the husband and try to escape. I knew this formula well. I was betting on the husband dying to save the wife and kids. The sense of familiarity started to put me at ease. I could follow the movie beat for beat to the very last scene. As the husband ventured down into the basement, determined to prove his wife and children wrong, I waited for the final reveal. Probably some sort of old hag ghost that would come screaming out at the camera. The father walked carefully through the basement, the camera picking up the sound of his heavy breathing and nothing else. Then a small creaking sound to his left. The screen shivered once more before the camera panned quickly to the noise. There, hanging from the rafters, was a woman in a white nightgown. Her soft brown hair fell in waves over her face, obscuring it from view. Her nightgown was ragged and dirty. Her feet were a dull gray color, as though she'd been dead for some time. What caused my breath to catch in my throat were her fingernails. They were painted a bright eggshell blue. 4 fingernails on her left hand, the nail on her ring finger missing entirely. My vision tunneled and everything around me started to tilt. I knew that hand. The one that had fixed my shirt. That sewed the bandana for Charlie. It was my mother's hand. I trembled as I watched my mother on the screen. Her body spinning slowly in its noose. Then, her quiet, raspy voice whispering my name. Joey. I wanted desperately to stop the movie, but I was frozen where I sat. Is it really possible, I wondered, to drop dead from terror? I was pretty sure I was about to find out. 10 days, came the whisper as my mother's body began to spin faster. The rope creaked under the weight. 10 days. Then her body dropped to the floor as though the rope had been cut. Everything was still. Even the father's breathing had cut off. I sat there for what felt like an hour, but must have been no more than 3 seconds, watching my mother's lifeless corpse on the floor. Then, an instant later, she was crawling toward the camera. Joey, come find me. Joey. The rasp was no longer a whisper, but a moan. I felt myself scrambling back against the couch in tandem with the father as he ran backwards, looking desperately for the stairs while keeping the woman in view of the camera. Don't let me die. What is this? I whispered. This isn't happening. This isn't real. But the woman on the screen didn't care that she couldn't be real. Just then, her face lifted to the camera. It was undeniably my mother's face, but ravaged from the effects of decay. Her gray skin hung loose from her bones, and her eyes were clouded over with a glassy film. Her mouth dropped open, and I swore I could see maggots and worms squirming inside her. I threw my laptop across the room so hard it broke against the opposite wall. I yanked the headband off and threw that too. I couldn't get enough air, no matter how hard I gasped, and for a moment I was certain that I was going to die, if not from the impossible horror on the screen, then because my heart gave out from the strain. It took me over an hour before I was calm enough to stand on my own 2 feet. The first thing I did was pick up the whole mess. My broken laptop, the headband, the note, the box, and stuff it all down in the trash. Whatever had just happened, whatever I'd just seen, I didn't want anything to do with it. Next, I called my mom, who was completely bewildered at my panic over the phone. "Honey, calm down. What's wrong? What happened?" she asked, the confusion in her voice genuine. I couldn't think of what to say. Any version of the truth would have her driving to my apartment to make sure I wasn't having a mental breakdown. I just had a nightmare that something happened to you, and I just had to make sure that you were okay. She spent the next hour soothing me over the phone, reassuring me that everything in the real world was just fine. Forget everything else. By the time we hung up, I felt just a bit better. In that short hour, I had reconstructed the narrative in my head. It really was a nightmare, or some kind of hallucination from the stress I'd been under at work. Everything was fine. Of course it was fine. Over the next few days, I resolved to put that strange, awful experience behind me. I went to work, I bought a new computer. I texted my friends and chatted with colleagues like nothing had happened at all, because of course, nothing did happen. I just had to keep telling myself that. Except, something isn't letting me pretend. A few days after watching the movie, strange things started to happen. At first, they were things I could explain away. The sound of footsteps in the hall was just my imagination. The low whispering that I heard in the dead of night was the wind. The shadows out of the corner of my eyes were due to exhaustion from those sleepless nights. But then, it started escalating. 2 days ago, I turned on my work computer and saw my mother's bloated corpse flash across the screen for just a second. Yesterday, I came home to my living room, trashed, like a tornado had ripped it apart, and there was Charlie in the middle of the chaos, watching me. Today, I got a call from my mother. I picked it up, glad to be able to hear her voice, to reassure myself that everything was fine and normal. But when I put the phone to my ear, all I could hear was static. "Hello? Mom?" Nothing but fuzz. "I think we have a bad connection," I said, ready to cut the call and call her back. But before I could, I heard a voice. A low, raspy whisper that sent a violent shiver down through my body. "Joey, come find me. Joey, don't let me die." "Who is this?" I said. I don't even remember deciding to say it. My voice sounded like it was coming from far away, through a tunnel or something. "Finish the movie, Joey." And then, a horrible scream. The most blood-curdling sound I'd ever heard, and somehow, I just knew it was her. The call dropped, and I was alone with the realization that it had been exactly 10 days since I started the movie. I've been calling for hours, but I can't reach her. I drove to her house, but she wasn't there. I've asked everyone I know and looked everywhere online, but it's like the streaming service just vanished out of existence. Nobody knows what I'm talking about, and there's no record of the company ever existing. As I tell this, I can tell that time is running out. Every second I wait, my mom is closer to death, and there's only one thing I can do to save her. So please, has anyone here signed up for Thumps? I desperately need to kill my subscription. As I got older, my parents told me that I was becoming a young adult and should leave Chuck E. Cheese behind. They weren't wrong. The place wasn't what it used to be, and a majority of the arcade games were being thinned out for machines that felt like they were games of chance. It was sad to see something devolve so much, but I moved on quite easily when I spotted an advertisement that read, "Coming soon, Zag's Theater." At first, I thought it was a movie theater chain until I Googled the name and learned how people could pay for a LARPing experience. This was amazing to me because I never participated in such a thing, and I always loved watching videos of people role-playing. I was even part of a play-by-post forum that has since died out. On its website, Zags was advertised as an event for all ages with quests that matured as the participant got older. So it wasn't like I was attending something for children. Months passed as I awaited the grand opening, in which I passed time by finishing a backlog of games until the doors swung open. I waited for school to end while trying to contain my excitement, and when that bell rang, I burst out of the class and into the streets as I made my way to the establishment. It was located in a walkable outlet mall where a bunch of people were waiting in line outside. A banner with the words "Grand Opening" along with the Zag character hung above the doors. He resembled a sprite wearing a purple tunic and had a purple pointy hat with hair sticking out, and he donned a big set of shoes. I later learned that Zag was actually a different type of kobold and not the short dragon kind that a lot of people were used to seeing. After a bit of waiting, it was finally my turn as I approached the front desk. The lobby had several doors. One led to a big hallway that took you to the waiting room, and one led to a souvenir store that sold merchandise of various characters. Unfortunately, I don't own any of the merchandise, which would have helped in providing the place's existence. But at the time, I thought I didn't need any of it. I paid and was handed a helmet, which when worn would display my statuses in-game. They were simplified to things like strength, speed, constitution, and intelligence. You could raise them upon each level up. Experience points weren't locked behind just slaying monsters, but also solving puzzles. Or helping the various NPCs. Wearing the helmet was also the only way to see any of the monsters, as they would otherwise be invisible. The only people not invisible were the actors, who dressed up as important characters such as a witch, bard, and a king's steward who returned frequently in following quests. There were a total of 4 different classes: the knight, thief, wizard, and cleric. It was all typical of the medieval fantasy setting, but I decided on the thief as I was rushed by the receptionist. As I was escorted into the waiting room, I was told a set of rules. The 2 I remember the most were the following. 1. Cooperative mode was restricted to only friends due to several incidents involving strangers attacking each other over disagreements. 2. Under no circumstances was the helmet to be removed during sessions. It made sense, as taking it off would kill all immersion. 3. To accommodate for everyone getting a chance, visits were limited to once a day. Violations of these rules would lead to a week-long ban. I also learned that there were 3 different kinds of tiers. Things would start easy, but they would get harder as you advanced in levels. This meant that the enemies would start generic, such as goblins, orcs, and skeletons. There was a chance of running into something interesting like centaurs or manticores, but they were rare encounters. I was taken to the waiting room where I waited nearly an hour before I was finally called. To be fair, it was the grand opening. Each room I entered either had me fighting a monster in turn-based tradition, solving a puzzle, or interacting with an NPC to try to gather clues. I remember my first objective was to find the nest of a magpie that had stolen an emerald ring off the fingers of a maiden. At one point, I got too cocky and my health depleted. However, by spending a bit of money, I was able to revive myself and proceed. Microtransactions at their finest. Some rooms could be solved by making use of class abilities. One example is that I could sneak past some of the monsters or pick the lock on a door as the thief to bypass a fight or puzzle. There would be consequences for failing, but it was usually an effect that wasn't severe. After finally locating the emerald ring that was stolen, I made my way to the next room to be rewarded with experience points and gold. I leveled up a couple of times and learned that the gold could be used to upgrade equipment. I decided to save it for things I felt would be needed and was mostly stingy on the first tier. Upon receiving my reward, everything would carry over into the following sessions thanks to a card handed to me, and the following door would deposit participants outside the building. The first few months of visiting Zags was uneventful. It was just typical quests that you would find in any role-playing game, but it was all in good fun. Sometimes a rare event would play out where you would run into Zag the Kobold. I didn't know about this until my first encounter with him. Sometimes you had to catch him, and sometimes he would just help out. Either way, he would do one of 4 things. He could restore the player's health, give some extra gold, grant experience points, or on the rare occasions, he would give you a magical item if he felt you were falling behind. On the following weeks, I spoke with a couple of students about Zag's theater. They kept talking about going back again and again, but as months passed, their opinion on the place changed. I don't want to talk about Zags anymore. Some of the characters and monsters frighten me. I tried to pressure for details, but the 2 siblings walked off and I never saw them again. To be fair, the killer clown or werewolf encounters may have been a little too much, but I also believed, at the time, that they were simply exaggerating things. I returned to the doors of Zag's theater and learned that I had reached the 2nd tier as my character. The quests and enemies would be trickier, but again, I was determined to see how far I would get. I also wanted to get to the 3rd tier because my peers were envious of those who reached it, and I wanted to be that cool person that people talked about. This time, I noticed that the lines had dwindled a bit, which confirmed that for some people, the novelty was beginning to wear off. For me, it meant having less of a wait time. I was surprised by how dark some of these new objectives were. One of the quests was to use stealth to murder a child who had been infected with a dangerous, incurable disease. Their parents told me that I had to do the deed as there wasn't any medicine that could help. There was also a room where animal bones laid scattered about. The flowers beneath them were white as they drained all the remaining blood from their kills. Stepping into any of them would drain your health, so I had to navigate around the killer plants. I assumed that this was the encounter that was unsettling to the siblings in my school. In the weeks to follow, I had decked myself out in powerful equipment, which was thanks to my unwillingness to spend on the 1st tier. I was killing the encounters left to right and thought nothing could triumph over me until I ran into the psychic. The psychic, who was called just that, the psychic, was the very first digital NPC to frighten me. They wore these dark orange robes that concealed their face. They didn't have any real gender, as their only distinguishable features were their long hands and sharp nose that poked from beneath the hood. I was asked several questions about myself from the psychic, which I answered truthfully. This was a huge mistake, as upon finishing, they began talking about all the sins and embarrassing acts that I had committed throughout my life. They weren't referring to my character, they were talking to me, the person who was playing the character. For the first time, I started shaking as they continued to accurately list out my flaws. I fled the room while panicking and took a small break to collect my thoughts on what just happened. Afterwards, I completed the objective and quickly left that day. I later learned from someone willing to talk about it that the psychic would only do this if you answered every question truthfully. If you lied to them, they would explain that they couldn't get a good reading on you before the door to the next room opened. I still ask myself something to this day. How was this NPC able to accomplish any of this? I took a break from the theater for a few weeks before I kept telling myself that the psychic's foresight must have been a coincidence. I showed up once more, but unlike before, there were only a few people left. A total of 6 recurring guests. Nothing else really happened, and I was able to get through the following quests that were still morbid, but there was still nothing compared to the character that I had previously encountered. I made it to Tier 3 after a few more sessions, which started at level 60 and onward. It felt like an accomplishment making it this far with all the epic equipment in my arsenal. I also had plenty of gold left over and was probably one of the strongest solo players there. However, despite feeling like I was prepared, I wasn't. It would be the last time I ever set foot inside. On that day, I was escorted by the receptionist, ready to do my first Tier 3 quest. She told me that I was one of the few to get this far and that I was about to face my hardest challenge. She also explained how I would receive a grand prize if I reached the end. My final quest was to locate a dog that was suspected in the death of their owners. The dragons, chimeras, giants, and other horrors awaited me as I kept my cool. There were 2 rooms that stood out to me in this tier. The first noticeable room had Zag, but he wasn't the happy or cheerful kobold from before. He saw my entry into the room and sat on this stump around the other trees. As I got closer, he left his spot and looked me in the eyes. His expression was a serious one. "Listen, this place is dangerous. You need to leave right away." I tried to ask what he meant by this. As if it was some secret quest. "I'm serious. They've gone too far." As Zag was about to finish that sentence, he suddenly disappeared without warning. It was almost as if what happened was some kind of glitch. I continued my advancement until I found the fated room that changed every feeling I had towards the theater. In the final room before that grand prize was a field with a cottage in the back. Next to the cottage and blocking the door was one lone dog. It didn't take long to identify it as a German Shepherd, but the thing that was off was it was panting, but its tongue wasn't sticking out. That was when I remembered the objective, to find a dog. As I stared at this thing, I noticed that littering the floors were several bones. They emitted a stench, and it was the kind of smell that you would try blocking out if you were driving or walking past a dead animal on the road. As I got closer, that stench got worse. Right around the shepherd were decaying bodies, and upon getting a good enough distance, I noticed it was slowly feasting on these remains. This startled me enough that it was finally noticed by my presence. It turned its head slowly and began to depart from where it was sitting. I kept my guard up and raised my magical short sword. It continued its approach, and as it did, its appearance changed. Its front and hind legs began warping as its chest burst open to reveal a set of teeth. Each of its paws burst to reveal a bladed scythe at the end as its body expanded, changing it into an unrecognizable fleshy mass. I'm afraid of parasites. They've given me frequent nightmares where they always find a way into my body and infect me. This phobia is what caused me to finally take off my helmet without caring about a suspension, and as I did so, the monster continued its approach. The bones, bodies, and that aberration should have been contained inside the helmet, but that thing was still in the room. What I thought was a 3D rendered creation began to let out a distorted cry. I turned around and sprinted. I kept calling out for help as I turned to see the thing slowly giving chase from behind. I rushed through each of the previous rooms until I found myself at the lobby. It was completely empty, no receptionists and no participants. The double glass doors were locked, and I could still hear the parasite gaining on me as it let out another screeching roar. I was thankful that the thing wasn't fast, and also thankful for the chairs. I took one off of the floor and used it at the door repeatedly until the glass finally shattered. An alarm sounded, and I bolted out of there. For a while, I didn't even go near Zag's theater until I eventually returned with some friends. We walked by to see that the place had closed down on the following month. Thinking back on it, I believe that place was involved with the missing people reports that frequently popped up around the time of Zag's grand opening. A part of me was happy that it was over. Whatever did happen, Zag's was no more. I could also no longer find anything about it online. Again, whatever happened, the authorities and Google were keeping knowledge of the business under wraps. I only told my non-LARP friends about what happened on my visit, and the fact that they found it hard to believe was a hint that I should keep quiet about it and move on with my life. It also didn't help that the people who went there would tell me that they were no longer allowed to talk about it. A lot of people have come forward about the supernatural at this place and have even gone into discussions about the oddities in their lives. So I want to ask a single question. Has anyone visited Zag's theater? If so, what was it like? Thank you so much for making it to the end of this video. A quick shout out to my patrons, Old Penguin, Rinku Star, Melissa Perez, Icy Narrates, Seven Cities Journalist, Cupcake Hips, Eric Cifuentes, Alonso, Austin My Love, Ellie Hutmeyer, Jesse Hartley, Lawrence Wallen, Mr. Sankofa, and William Hartley. I always try to link a different charity in the description, so go ahead and check that out. I'm also going to start having more things on my Patreon soon, so keep your eyes peeled. And as always, I'd love to know how I can be praying for you, so go ahead and drop a comment and let me know how I can do that. Thank you so much, and I hope to see you in the next video.